Brad Johnson. It is Friday, August 30th. There is a great deal going on with China. It's probably unwise to ignore it. The stuff which most people are seeing are the protests in Hong Kong, and of course the experts are on all sides of that one. Some people are saying China's folded. Some people are saying they're invading Hong Kong, and they're going to use this as an excuse to put an iron boot down onto that island. But I'm sure there's a lot of other things. There's Huawei, and I have deep suspicions about China's keen interest in helping other countries by installing their own large bandwidth and high-speed internet switches all over their countries. I think that China should be sequestered. But what can you tell us?
Well, yeah, China's really it's a very interesting situation now, and of course this was all sparked back when President Trump came out, and you really got to look at this guy, and he truly is a master negotiator, and he's way better at this than anyone that we've had in the U.S. government for certainly decades. They basically, all his predecessors just didn't negotiate things really, and he does. He very seriously negotiates these things. So with China, as we all know, and it's things we've talked about, China's been stealing billions and billions of dollars from the West, the United States, all of us, by the way that they impose their trade deals and so on, and stealing patent rights and things like that into China, so that if you want to sell your product in China, you have to give us all of your patent secrets and all of that, and then they copy it and use it and sell it out in variations to other companies. And so President Trump took a look at all of this, of course, knew for years that this was a problem. So he went to China and said, if you look back at how he spoke, it was very interesting. Now in hindsight, you can kind of see what was going on. And he said, the president of China is this great guy, really smart, got a tough job and all this stuff. But he's been stealing us. China's been stealing us blind for all these years, stealing billions of dollars worth of intellectual property rights and different things where they've been absolutely screwing us over. Now, I don't blame China. We had our pocket open and let them stick their hand in and pull out whatever they could grab for all these years. Those days are over. But don't blame China, but those days are over. You're either going to make an honest deal with us, or then we got problems, and we're going to have to see what to do. So then you start going down the steps that Trump has slowly done to kind of put the screws to China and make it more and more difficult for them. And one of the things that for all of our friends in Canada that happened was I believe she was the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, the number 2 at the office of Huawei in Canada, whose dad was a very big wig back in China, connected to the government, and she got indicted. So in the United States, and so we're asking for extradition. That case is still dragging on. I believe she's under house arrest in Canada, and it's still playing out in the court system. Well, that was sort of the opening shot across the bow, and since then. We've gone through various rounds of negotiation. The next big thing that sort of happened was China said, "Yeah, okay, we papered out a deal. We've got something here that we'll agree to." So they sat down at the table with the United States and they started screaming and waving their arms, going, "No, we're not going to sign any of that. Well, what we're really going to sign is only this, this, and this. These were the changes. And you know what? You don't like it? Screw you. Then we're going to go do this." And so President Trump, I think just surprised the living hell out of the Chinese, and he said, "Yeah, okay, you give it your best shot." And he started imposing tariffs, and we've all heard, 5%, 10%, and now we're going to the 20%. But behind all of this, there's a lot of other stuff going on, and China is doing absolutely everything it can to make Trump look bad and to pressure him. And don't anyone forget that all of this stuff Iran is doing, capturing ships and making trouble here and there in the world, all of that stuff, they're essentially a surrogate of China. They're backed by China for a lot of these things. So this acting up would not be happening if the Chinese weren't saying, "Yeah, go do it, guys." So that's why we're seeing all of that, to try and make Trump look bad. And everything they're doing is each time, these are sort of the old tricks of the socialist world to try and put pressure on Trump. But Trump's a negotiator. It doesn't work with him. And Trump has them totally figured out, and they really just do not have a clue. And so I think Hong Kong is a reflection of that too. Now, make no mistake about who the Chinese are. And just a little side comment, something I never hear anybody ever talk about. And the flag of China that everybody sees is that red flag, and in the upper left quadrant are the 5 stars, 1 big star and 4 little stars, 5 stars. That is actually not the flag of China. That is actually the flag of the Communist Party of China. A big difference. But that's not the flag. That flag was never used by anybody. It was created and passed by one of the Communist Party meetings. They installed it to be the flag that they're using for China. But it's the flag of the Communist Party of China. I mean, that's just how they view everything. So all of the government buildings, everything that they use out there, those are all flying under the flag of the party, not China. And that's their perspective. And which, by the way, that's not new or anything. The hard left governments often do that. For example, the Soviet Union, they had that red flag with the hammer and sickle. That was the Communist Party flag. The red flag with the swastika in the middle the Nazis used, that was the Nazi Party flag, not the German flag. The Sandinistas have done that, back in the days of the Central American conflict. They put the Sandinista flag over all the buildings too. They also did something a little different because they would fly both. They would fly the party flag and the country flag, which that you don't see necessarily outside of these examples. But it's the perspective of how they view the world. And so go forward back into discussing Hong Kong, and that's precisely how they view Hong Kong. Hong Kong belongs to the party. Everyone and everything belongs to the party. I've lived in socialist countries before and talked to people and understand their view. Their view is quite different than any one of us in the West would. I mean, I look at some of the stuff they're saying and I go, oh my God, that is so stupid. How could you possibly think that? But they do. And one of those things is they actually view themselves as property of the party. So if the party calls you and demands your life, it is your duty to give it. So if it means just stand up in front of a post and get shot, well, if the party needs it, the party needs it. That's your job. So this whole perspective that they have as communists is that. And Hong Kong, they've always intended. There was never a time when they didn't intend to fully conquer Hong Kong. Now, they made a deal, and they've been doing it incrementally. This is not the first time we've had riots in Hong Kong. When they took over the police and started taking over government agencies, that was just the steps that they were doing all along, knowing that the ultimate goal was to take over Hong Kong completely and just, as you mentioned, put it under the boot heel of the Communist Party of China, which there is no discussion. There's nothing to debate. That has always been the intent, and they've always been working towards that incrementally. Now, I think they took a look at this and they said, what a perfect time to really ruffle his feathers over this. We'll crack down on Hong Kong to put pressure on Trump, and we get what we want anyway. So it's a twofer, all upside. Now, that hasn't worked either, and Trump has basically been able to start to turn this back against him. And so what are some of the things you're starting to see him do? And by the way, let's not forget the South China Sea, where we just had an incident where a U.S. Navy vessel was cruising through international waters and was challenged by a Chinese Navy ship who claimed it was territorial waters. So they're very aggressively trying to expand out and create problems and looking for a way to make Trump look bad, because the last thing they want is another 4 years of President Trump. But elections aren't until November of 2020, so they've got a long time to go through this negotiation period. So it's going to be very interesting.
I believe that the United States has committed to the Philippines that they would assist Duterte in protecting his territorial waters from what looks like routine Chinese invasions.
Yes, and something that is key is Taiwan. Now, the United States has agreed to some 66 was, I believe, the number of new F-16s to be delivered to Taiwan. Now, that's a big deal in a number of ways. Now, they already had F-16s, but they were an aging type. The equipment that was in the older F-16s is greatly inferior to that of the new F-16s. The basic airframe is mostly the same, if I understand correctly, but the equipment that's in it is the weapons and detections and all of the systems that are in that aircraft are vastly improved. So the new F-16 is a much, much more effective aircraft than the old F-16. Now, it's not like a generational leap forward, but it is a substantial increase. So this is not taking place in a vacuum. That wasn't just some separate deal that just happened to work out that way. Trump has said, okay, 20% tariffs. The Chinese economy is shrinking. It's literally shrinking. Manufacturing jobs are flooding out of China to go to other places where they can also do business. There's lots of places where those guys can set up and do things and have a cheap labor force and all of that to do business and sell products back to the United States without a 20% tariff. So they're running away as quickly as they can. China is bleeding. They're bleeding out, and they've got to stop that bleeding. And so Trump is continuing to put the screws to them. And this F-16 sale was kind of the last really big thing, which, by the way, Mr. President, if you're listening, yeah, do the F-16s. Fantastic. Good job. I'm an admirer. I say consider the F-35s, which is the advanced fighter aircraft. Taiwan has been our friend since World War II, including the World War II fighting with us. And they've been a good ally of the United States for all of this time, since World War II, including World War II time. And that should not be forgotten. And I don't think they should be abandoned. And there is no question, zero question, nobody should be debating this. And anyone that thinks it's otherwise is really a fool. And that is, China fully intends to reconquer Taiwan. They'll do it when they can, how they can. But they're working to do it incrementally all the time now, and they've made a lot of progress infiltrating the political parties and all of that, and they have certain political influence in Taiwan already. But those guys need to be able to defend themselves, and if we can supply F-35s to them, wouldn't that be a great stick to poke the Chinese in the eye with? And what are they going to do now? I mean, what are they going to do? They're, like I said, economically, they're bleeding out, and the 20% tariffs are going to be imposed soon. So you can push back. You have to push back at every level with the Chinese, because that's how they view it. They view the whole thing as one big, wide negotiation. They don't understand President Trump. They don't understand that he's a hard negotiator. They haven't figured all that out yet. And now they're coming back kind of softly. Their latest thing was a couple of days ago at the economic summit in, where was it? Brussels? I forget. The G27 or 7 or 8 or whatever, G8, whatever it is, they just had the economic summit. The Chinese came out there and were saying, well, we need calm discussion and all of that. What does that mean for the Chinese? That doesn't mean capitulation. They're not ready. They haven't figured out that they're getting their ass handed to them, but they will. And as these greater tariffs start to kick in, as we're starting to sell arms to Taiwan, as we're starting to push back with the Philippines, push back on all of the South China Sea things and destroying them economically, they're going to at some point have to look at it and say, we have to stop the bleeding. My question out of that is, will this take place before elections? Are the Chinese going to bet and hang on and keep fighting through November of next year, or will they capitulate sometime before then? Now, if they continue to bleed out economically at the pace they are, they're not going to make it till November. Their economy would be, something along half or a third of what it is at its high, say a year ago. So, I mean, that's devastating. I mean, can you imagine the economy of Canada or the United States or any of the Western countries being cut in half in a 2-year period? I mean, it would just be
so imagine it in Canada. It's inconceivable, but we'd have to have a prime minister that deliberately undermined the oil industry in Alberta and prevented them from actually producing or exporting goods, prevented any kind of pipelines to allow the transmission of domestically produced oil to going for domestic consumption, and bringing in huge numbers of people that don't contribute to the economy but have great needs. So it's difficult for me to conceive of a situation like that.
Yeah, yeah, I think somebody should take his eyebrows hostage until he agrees to open business for oil and all of that in Canada. A great industry can make a lot of money, and it drives the economy. And why someone, their political concerns are more important to them than the people of Canada. And we've had that problem in the United States, and certainly the problem exists in much of Western Europe. So, yeah, it's a problem.